In 2025, we should be past paper-based reporting, but are we? If you run a school, a leisure centre, or a hotel, and you have a pool, you need to listen to this. Hello and welcome. I am James. Welcome to the Boostara Podcast. We meet leaders in business and education and uncover the truths and insights from their amazing experiences. At Boostara, we help businesses boost growth, cut costs, and gain better business insights. If you'd like to learn more about how we can leverage AI for you, type the word growth into the comments below, and I will be sure to reach out. Today, we are joined by the amazing Daniel Ekema. He is the director of PoolWaterTS. Is that correct?
PoolWaterTS.
PoolWaterTS. Hello, Daniel. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very, very welcome to be on. And I've got to say, you probably win the award for the best backdrop in terms of posters. I've got to say, I've never seen anyone come onto the podcast with such vibrant posters.
Thank you.
I mean, Daniel, your product is really quite interesting. And I know when I reached out to you initially, you gave me the response of, would you, really want me on the podcast? Is this really something people would be interested in learning and knowing about? But I do genuinely think that both your product and your message is something that's really important, especially for those three category owners that I just described. I mean, Daniel, could you just give us a brief kind of overview of yourself, your background, your history, and what led you to found the project that you have started?
Of course, yes, no problem. So, hello everyone. My name's Daniel Ekema. I'm currently, as James said, the director of PoolWaterTS Limited. Previously, I started in the leisure industry around 1995, starting as a sports assistant and lifeguard, then moving my way up through the chain to head lifeguard and so on. Throughout my time moving on from that point, I was always kind of around the pools and also the plant rooms, especially in my role as a sports centre manager as well, which was up until 2022. So as part of that, I was very active in the plant room in terms of monitoring the water quality, dealing with the plant room conditions in terms of the filtration, the circulation, etc. And we were very much using the paper reports to log everything, but they get put away in a store and you don't really ever see them again unless there's something that obviously becomes an issue further down the line. But as part of that as well, I found it difficult as a manager to monitor what was happening in that pool scenario from any given moment, especially when I'm at home and people call up in terms of issues with the plant room. So I then obviously have to get them to try and explain everything that's going on and then ultimately go in and try and see for myself. Now, that led me to essentially create a dashboard on the spreadsheet, which was in the cloud that my staff could then enter the information on, which meant that I could then remotely access that to be able to see what was happening in the pool at that point. That kind of developed over a period of probably about sort of 6 to 12 months, maybe a bit longer, and then ended up being incorporated into a Google product. So Google Sheets Online using Google Forms, which was great. We had graphs and everything that were automated as part of that with the Excel formulas and so on. And that was really working really well. But ultimately, it didn't do enough of what we wanted still. It didn't have the validation when they were filling in that form. They had to submit it to then look at the sheet to then see what was going on. So quite a bit of a drawn out process still. And that then led me to essentially creating my business as it is now, PoolWaterTS, which is essentially a web-based software system for logging and analyzing pool test results and related checks. So any given moment, I can go onto this platform, look at the site that I'm dealing with at the time and see all the checks and tests that they've done over a period of time, even as far back as a year or even further. So that, from a management point of view, gives you really clear access to be able to see any trends that are happening in that data and ultimately see whether the readings are good or bad based on PTAG code of practice guidance and also site-specific conditions as well. So as a management tool, it helps massively in terms of monitoring and managing those pools. Wow. And that's essentially kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And I think for people obviously listening that they have an idea of what the pool plant is. They understand. Oh yeah, someone comes in and dips something into the pool and then chucks a load of chlorine in. And that's pretty much it. It's much more complicated than that. And I think the implications, I think that's really the point of what you're really solving here. The implications of poor management of the pool can be really, really bad for people. Can you just explain a little bit
Yeah.
more on that?
So ultimately, people go to a swimming pool, they want to swim, they want to have nice conditions, not only the water, the clarity, making sure it sort of smells nice as well, and also the atmosphere that generally they're in. And that's all controlled by the people that go down into that plant room and deal with those systems in terms of the dosing, the filtration, the heating, and so on. But that needs to be monitored to make sure it works right. And that then involves the pool test, so where it could be a lifeguard, a duty manager, or a plant engineer that'd be taking those water samples from the pool, going to a certain area and then testing them. So for pH, for free chlorine, total chlorine, and various other parts of that water balance. Without those tests, they won't necessarily be able to control that water over a long period of time.
Yeah.
There's generally automated dosing systems, but those have issues potentially as well, because ultimately they're not testing the water that's in the pool. They're testing the water that's come from the pool and might have a bit of a time lag.
Yeah.
So therefore the conditions at the controller aren't necessarily representative of what's actually happening in the pool at that moment, especially if you've had, let's say, 20, 30 or more people going to the pool at one time. The pollution that they're bringing in requires then more disinfection, and ultimately being able to then react to that proactively but also reactively is quite crucial in making sure that water quality stays good. And yeah, ultimately those people that are dealing with the plant room on a day-to-day basis or bi-hourly in terms of that testing, those are the ones that are making sure that it's safe and stays safe for those swimmers. But generally as a swimmer you don't tend to see that.
I mean, for for your program, for your product, does it get more complicated the bigger the pool, the bigger the area that you're having to deal with? I'm just thinking like something like Center Parks, for example, where there's outdoor rapids and there's there's multiple areas to it, slides all connected, but maybe just a really large area. And like you said, so many people coming in and out at different times.
Yeah, you've touched on very, very nicely there in terms of obviously the complexity of some pools. Some of them are really simple in terms of, as a basic overview that they might have one pool, therefore one filtration system and so on. And then you've got the likes of obviously the big facilities and not amusement parks, holiday parks, etc., that might have linked pools in them. So you might have one pool that gets the main fresh water that then leads into another one, then into another one, then back into the plant room. So you've got systems like that as well that do complicate it. It's a simple process that the water comes out from the plant room, goes in through the pool with the fresh disinfected water, comes back out with pollution, gets filtered, then heated and treated with chlorine or whichever disinfectant they're using, pH control as well, adding an acid, for example, then back into the pool. So therefore it goes through that cycle again. Ultimately that happens in every pool facility. But there are those complexities like with the linked pools where that first pool will have the best conditions, and then ultimately that last one will then potentially have the worst conditions, which may not be as desirable as you'd like. So in that sort of system, you always need to make sure you're testing at that last point before it goes back into the plant room, because you need to make sure that is got the minimum standard that is required for people to be in the pool, not the highest standard that you want. It's that minimum allowable. So for example, one of the bits of guidance from PUTAG, so the Pool Water Treatment Advisory Group, so the free chlorine should be no less than 0.75 milligrams per litre.
Right. And
the chlorine the treated water you've got coming into the pool might be at 1.5. But by the time it gets to that last point, it might be a lot lower than that. Obviously, this is just kind of giving numbers at the moment, but you need to make sure that that last point of where it comes out of the pool isn't any lower than 0.75 ultimately. If it is, you need to then consider increasing that dosing rate or increasing the set points essentially on those systems to make sure you're coping at that last point of the pool where a swimmer might be.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's fascinating. I mean, for someone like myself, I love sport, I love swimming, but the complexities of the management like that is, it's a science as well for the vast majority of it, right? I guess, from your sort of perspective working in this area, Daniel, have you seen sort of trends or changes over the last kind of couple of years when it comes to management of pools and use of this kind of technology?
Yes, very much so, especially as you compare before and after COVID, for example. So prior to COVID, there was a lot more pools that had their own pool engineers, for example. Throughout when COVID started moving forwards, you then end up with a bit of a talent loss. So people were made redundant, obviously to save money and so on. And then you find it difficult to replace those people with the same level of knowledge that you had then before. So in terms of that, then it then comes down to the safety aspect of the pools. So how are you going to monitor them correctly with the people that aren't necessarily as experienced? How are you going to get them to that standard that they need to be to make sure it runs efficiently? And ultimately, how they can make sure it stays safe. One of the problems that we found after COVID, after pools started returning, was that we ended up having an increase in pool chemical incidents, for example. Which were for a variety of reasons, but some of them most prominently where people have accidentally mixed chemicals. Another issue that led to that was also in terms of the color of the chemical containers. So we call them carboys or drums, essentially, where previously there were different colors. So chlorine was generally a black tank, a carboy. Acid was generally a blue one. And then you'd have another chemical called PAC, which is polyammonium chloride, which is a coagulant. We won't need to go into that necessarily, but that was generally a clear or opaque barrel. Now, because of COVID, we then had situations where there was a reduction in those containers that were being able to be supplied, and therefore they were put in similar color containers, but with different labels on. Ultimately, people were used to those different colors, and actually that caused an issue potentially for some situations where those chemicals were being mixed accidentally. So a barrel of the same color that was actually a different chemical might have been put into the day tank station. The injector put in, and then it would obviously cause a chemical gas leak essentially due to the chemical mixing. That's not to say that was the only situation. There are others as well, which ultimately comes down to training and experience in those areas and in terms of those chemicals. And that ultimately is one of the main hazards of the pool, essentially, because you've got those chemicals, you've got the risk of chemical mixing incidents, which then releases chlorine gas, essentially, which, as we all know, hopefully is really, really bad. So we've had situations like there was the Olympic facility in London that had the chlorine gas incident, which meant lots of people evacuated from the area and some were hospitalized. So, we've got situations like that we want to make sure we prevent. And ultimately that comes down to training, experience and knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. You just reminded me actually of a friend who I won't name, operators or places, but and it's slightly different. Went on holiday with his partner and parents-in-law. They were staying simply at a villa with a pool. He was the only one to swim in that pool. The others just didn't want to or didn't like the idea, went in and they're like, oh no. But he was the only one that daily swam in it. By the end of the end of the week, he developed kind of sickness, basically. He headache, migraines that got worse as he returned to the UK, then had to be hospitalized and was hospitalized with a heart condition, off work for 6 months. And they pinpoint it. It's difficult to say exactly, but pinpoint it to the cleanliness of the pool. And when they then looked on Google Earth and found their villa, they could see actually on Google Earth it was a kind of algae green compared to the blueness of the others. And swimming in it, he obviously had no sort of a thought about it. But if the chemicals have or haven't been put into the pool, or the incorrect amount, or it's not been cleaned properly, the implications of swimming in the pool that has not been properly managed can be horrendous.
Yes,
absolutely horrendous.
Definitely, yeah.
And that only goes further to state how important your product and your work is, Daniel. I want to ask, with this being relatively new, going out to the market, what's been the the challenges and the uptake of this system?
So the main challenge is the reluctance, I suppose, for people wanting to move away from paper. So sometimes the view is that they like what they know and they don't want to change. I've had a couple of customers like that recently that haven't wanted to move away from paper. They've got staff that have kind of pushed it, but ultimately they want to stay as they are, which is absolutely fine because ultimately it needs to work for the site. So with my system, I'm not a salesperson ultimately. And I don't like the pressure sales side of things. So I would never do that with customers or anyone that's interested in my product. So the system has to be right for the individual site. If it isn't, then they shouldn't use it. That's what I say to all the people that are interested in my system. But ultimately, if you can use my system and look at the data that it gives you, the visuals, for example, and the different parameter sort of identifiers, then it will help massively in identifying various things in terms of your pool, whether it's working well, or of course, if it's not, what might be those issues. So a key one that popped up quite early on in a site using my system was that they didn't recognize initially that their filters weren't, the filter gauges weren't working. Such a simple thing in terms of obviously monitoring those. But as soon as they started monitoring using my system, they could see that it was just a flat line all the way across. With filters, as they get dirtier, the pressure builds up on the inlets, and
Right.
reduces on the outlets. So you can then see, obviously, how dirty it's getting. You then backwash the filter. This particular site, they were backwashing essentially once a week, I think it was, but they weren't doing it based on the pressures on the filters, which they should generally be. So as a guide, PoolTag recommend that you should backwash based on the pressure differential, but at least once a week. So they were covering that base at least once a week. But they never recognized that the filter pressure was never changing. So ultimately, those gauges weren't obviously helping them in terms of understanding the condition of their filter and whether actually it was appropriate to backwash, or of course, if there's actually a long-term issue in terms of those filters. So to start with, when you get the new filters, the pressures between the inlet and outlet should generally be fairly close. As the filter gets older, those pressures will creep further away after a backwash, and that it will show kind of how bad the filters are, I suppose. Sorry, the condition of filters over a period of time, because then you go down the route of changing the media and potentially the filter itself longer term. But yeah, because they couldn't recognize, or they didn't recognize that the filter pressure wasn't changing, they obviously didn't have a gauge on that intended. So using my system, they're not able to identify it as flat lining essentially all the way across all their techs, which then identified that obviously the filter pressures weren't changing, therefore the gauges weren't working. So then they obviously got that changed. They were then able to monitor obviously the pressures as they went forwards in terms of when they did backwashes and so on. So they can monitor how that filter was over a period of time essentially, and optimize their backwashing routines. So kind of a simple thing which ultimately can have a big influence in their pool quality.
Yeah. And I guess then, the uptake of, your system, then in practice, it can be a really good return on investment for them, because
Definitely.
they're not just, they can identify the problems quicker and increase the longevity of the pools, right? And
yes,
parts
no,
that they're
definitely.
using.
Yeah. So with my system, one of my kind of morals, ethoses, I suppose, is to make sure it stays cheap. In my opinion, it's a quality product. It's done to suit all different types of facility and be dynamic to those facilities. So if they've got 4 filters, it will show 4 filters. If they've only got one, it'll only show one. It's very bespoke, basically, how they can set it up. But ultimately, I want to maintain a cheap price point on it so that even small sites can use the system.
Right.
Biggest facilities, corporate sort of groups, they'd obviously be able to afford a higher price, but ultimately I've got it set nice and low so that even those smaller sites can use it without any restrictions essentially. And there's also essentially a price for life on it. So the price they start with, they keep that all the way along so they can essentially plan for budgeting as well. So very much about trying to help the customer rather than it benefiting me ultimately, which hopefully it will long term, but ultimately it's about trying to help the industry improve and giving them the opportunities to be able to as well.
Exactly. And it's just giving a good business sense. If you have that kind of facility and you want to get the most out of it and care for it, then this is something that you should have in place, rather than relying on, like you said, the manual input from staff members that may be revolving rounds, maybe trained, maybe not trained, maybe looking after it, maybe not. Then the implications it can have on your customers that are using the pool. There's so many things that could go wrong, right?
Yeah, essentially paper sheets, obviously you can't analyze the data fully, not unless you're really, really good at numbers and obviously, visualizing obviously what's in front of you. But most people can't in terms of those sort of reporting. So, they can't see graphs obviously on a paper sheet unless they obviously draw it themselves, for example.
Yeah.
And so you can't recognize the trends as easily. And obviously they get damaged, they get lost.
Yeah.
They get put in a storeroom where obviously people forget where they are. Whereas obviously with a digital system, whether it's a spreadsheet or my system, then ultimately they can obviously monitor and track things over a longer period of time easier.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, do you have a customer you can explain to us, that's had that kind of positive, impact on their business, their operations?
So there's quite a few. It's about which one do I choose and kind of the depth, otherwise. I suppose that there's one in particular where it's a multi-site group. I won't name them or anything like that, but ultimately, prior to that, obviously all on paper. In terms of that oversight, that management at the corporate level, they weren't able to see on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, or whatever, what those pool test results are. So they relied obviously on the site to make sure they're obviously maintaining the water quality, but ultimately they weren't able to check up on it unless those reports are sent in.
Yeah.
In terms of then using my system, taking that on, they then have a nice quick overview of all of those different sites. So from a group health and safety perspective, they could see a snapshot of what each of those as and when they wanted to make sure they were complying, making sure they're within limits, making sure they're safe. So that from that point of view gives them massive confidence in each of those sites, or gives them the opportunity to then interject or intervene where those readings weren't quite right, or if they could recognize that actually over a period of time, those results are dropping down and actually getting to the point where it needs a bit of intervention to make it work better. So it gives them that insight and the ability to kind of oversee from that corporate level, essentially.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I guess for this kind of technology, I mean, are you the only sole player in this kind of area? Are you the only one that you know of? How do you get your product out there to for more uptake? Is it just
Yes.
a case of referrals? This leisure center or this school, this hotel had a good experience installing the system, and then they spread the word on to someone else.
Kind of all of the above to an extent.
Yeah.
Yes, there are other systems. They all have their own unique features and I suppose look to them and usability. Ultimately, as a sports center manager, I tried all of those, but they didn't do what I needed as a sports center manager.
Right.
They were either too expensive or didn't have the usability or didn't have the features that I needed. So ultimately, that's why I created the system as it is now.
Yeah.
Now, there are other ones that are internationally, such as in America and also Australia. Those are good systems, but ultimately they're very specific to those regions. So
Right.
using in the UK isn't actually that great. But there's also other ones that are linked to photometers, such as with Payne Test and Lovibond, that are the main kind of manufacturers for those photometers. So just so everyone understands, photometers are essentially the pieces of digital equipment that you test the water in.
Right.
It gives you a digital measurement essentially. So yeah, there's free software with those, but ultimately it's about the link to those systems, those photometers, the Bluetooth connection, for example, but it doesn't have anything else on top of it. It's just literally for those tests.
Yeah.
Whereas with my system, for example, it includes all the water test inputs that you can put on there for pH, free chlorine, and so on. Also your water balance, but also all the checks within your plant room and poolside areas, so that you can kind of see a whole overview picture of what's happening across the board, rather than just in one little section being the pool test. So, for some sites, it might be that their air handling systems are designed in such a way that actually the external conditions affect the pool air inside.
Right.
So at a previous sports center I used to work at, whenever it was raining outside, we used to find it was a lot more humid on poolside, just because of the way the air handling system was set up. On sunny days outside, it was extremely hot on poolside. So, you've got those sort of interferences from outside that can affect your poolside conditions.
Yeah.
And being able to log those in line with all your tests and checks can actually give you a better picture of what's happening on a day-to-day basis as well. And also historically being able to look back on them as well.
Yeah.
So
No.
it's massive.
I think your background, as a leisure center manager as well, that kind of that feeds you in nicely to relation with people that are all in similar positions that need it, right? Because you understand where they're at, you understand their challenges, their difficulties, and how this can really help them within their specific situation.
Definitely. I mean, ultimately, I've worked my way up from the ground. So started as a sports assistant to lifeguard, to head lifeguard, duty manager, shift manager, up to sports center manager.
Yeah.
So I've been in all those different roles that, for me, I've then put into the system. So, the system is designed that it's usable for any level, and it's got features to suit any level, such as the management oversight, all the way down to the usability for those people that are on shift doing those pool tests. So, it's very easy and very intuitive to be able to use and find where you need to do things on it, which is very much kind of the guiding principle of the system as well. There's no point having something where it's overcomplicated and you can't see logically where you're meant to go to the next thing. It needs to be quick and easy to use so that, it doesn't slow down those shift operations. Ultimately, the people that are doing pool tests are generally working on shift, which means they might be doing setups, they might be dealing with reception, customer inquiries, cleaning, PoolWaterTS, and all other sorts of things. So their time is very precious.
Yeah.
So a system that helps them optimize that and gets them obviously working quite quickly with it, then actually makes it more efficient for them on shift as well, and obviously reduces stress essentially.
Yeah.
So that's one of the key features of my system as well.
That really leads on very nicely to the point of AI, right? Which AI, as most people understand it, is supposed to do exactly that. It's supposed to take away the stress. It's supposed to free up our time, take away the repetitive actions, be something to help free us up for more high value activities. When it comes to AI, when it comes to automation, what's your standpoint, and what's your your view from your specific position?
From my point of view, I think AI will have a place in the future, but I think it's got a little bit of a way to go, especially in terms of the pool plant side of things. To give you an example, I've got two roles, PoolWaterTS, and also I work for the Institute of Swimming as Program Leader for Pool Plant. And quite often I'll use AI to kind of challenge what I know is correct in terms of, the different set points and different sort of processes in pool plant. And I kind of challenge Gemini or ChatGPT or any of the others, and just kind of sense check things on there. And actually sometimes it comes back with the wrong information. And then I have to then challenge it back and then say, sorry, yeah, I got it wrong. There are still failings in terms of that. It's got a long way to go still. To make sure that it gives accurate information for those people on the ground level, or even obviously in management for swimming pools. But I think it does have a place in the future, because ultimately it will help problem solve and help with reactive responses to different issues in the pool plant in the long term. But it does have a little way to go still.
Is there a use case, with your system that AI could read the data that it's presented and then trigger an alarm? For example, this is trending in a particular fashion on this particular chemical, and you need to, investigate this. Do you think that could be a use case for the future?
I think so, definitely. And I suppose taking away from the knowledge side of AI, the analysis, I think, it's probably ready for that now to an extent. But in terms of my system, I'm not quite in the position to be able to put that in just yet. But I think definitely it's got a place. I know of some dosing controller manufacturers that have that built into their software already. So, for example, there's one that is quite popular at the moment that is cloud-based. So you've got the controller in the plant room. It analyzes the pool water, and then it sends it off into the cloud so it can be analyzed, for example. That one, I'm pretty sure they've got some form of AI built in at the moment that can then set triggers, or it's just very good logic essentially. But in terms of what you said there, and being able to track something over a long period of time, then actually pop a notification up to say this is like I said earlier about where it's spotted gradually going down from that management overview. Like I said, if AI can do that and obviously be proactive in terms of recognizing when something's getting to that point, or even sooner, that this could be something that you need to keep an eye on, that could be really key in obviously maintaining pool water quality and pool plant operations essentially.
Yeah. And I suppose just freeing up the time, right? Because you don't need the specialist to analyze and look at the data, to check all the time, but wait for that trigger. But then, like you said, at this point, unless it is 99% accurate, then you you would feel, well, it is more important that you have that set of eyes looking at the data that we know is correct to be able to flag that up. Because again, it goes back to the implications, right? If people just leave it to one side and actually the AI is analyzing it wrong, then that's when the problems come up.
Yes, yeah, totally. I mean, just to kind of follow on from that and a little bit you said a second ago, at no point do we ever want people to not do the checks. Because ultimately that human checking process and obviously making sure that things are obviously within parameters and obviously right, there's no, that visual or that sound that you can hear when you go in the plant room is not something that AI is necessarily going to be able to do. That human perspective. So, those manual checks that are done by an individual on shift, regular intervals, are really keen, and those should never stop, but AI can support those. So it should never take away from them, they can support, because ultimately digital systems can fail. they
Yeah.
can stop working, especially if the power goes out, for example, or various other situations. So having that human factor is critical in making sure those pool plant operations are working efficiently.
And you only have to look at, what's happened more recent months. Big brand names where they've been, they've had cybersecurity issues,
Yes.
outages, Jaguar, Land Rover, right, Marks and Spencers, all of these, and the implications of those things just going down are huge. It's affecting people's jobs, right?
Yes.
Here it's exactly the same. It goes down, and no one's got an idea on the on the data set. That's a problem. You still need to have those specialists. You still
Yeah.
need to take due diligence in caring for the pool and the quality. It's just using the data sets a higher level to be more accurate, right? That's where this comes in really strongly.
Definitely. And to kind of put this in a different kind of, not perspective, but kind of putting this in a different sort of angle. For example, with lifeguarding these days, there's now assisted lifeguard technologies, which essentially, have underwater cameras or oversight cameras that can help a lifeguard identify where someone might be in trouble or might have submerged for an extended period of time. But essentially, those lifeguards are still in place, still in post to obviously do the rescues and obviously supervise the pool as well. And that's kind of how pool plant should kind of get to at some point, but never, take away from that human element. And ultimately, we need to make sure that the safety measures are there at all times, because you could easily kind of fall into the trap where you lose that knowledge in the plant room of those staff, a bit like obviously the period over COVID. But, long term, we need to make sure that those staff that are operational still have that knowledge and still have the ability to be able to react. And if AI takes over too much or takes too much of a supervisory role, then you kind of lose that ability to learn those bits of information and that experience. So it needs to be in line with, not in place of.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting insights. I guess, the kind of last sort of AI kind of question, Daniel, if taking off your more technical hat off, right, and then putting on the business hat on, thinking about AI, and this is something I pose to pretty much every business leader is, where do you think in your business, if you could get AI technology just to take over a part of the business development, the business growth, the operations, the day to day, if AI could just do one part of that, what do you think would have the biggest impact?
I think for me, the marketing side of things is probably where it would help me most. I wouldn't want it to take over the emails, because ultimately that connection that I build with the customers, I think is crucial. So I would hope that they learn to trust me over a period of time, that I'm going to do what I can to try and support them. It's not about making more money for me. It's about trying to make sure they can improve through their systems and ultimately helping the industry. So that marketing, if AI can take over that and obviously develop that side of things, then that for me would be massively sort of beneficial. And that's something I would want to look into quite sort of energetically, I suppose.
Yeah, amazing. And I think that's the as I talk to a lot of people, the technology is there, the capacity is there, that for small business leaders like myself, like yourself, the capacity to actually market and outreach at scale, quickly is there, in a way that has never been there before, right? I think that's the real amazing thing about AI and the technology that we have available. Is it even just 5-6 years ago, the capabilities just weren't there. What you do now is simply amazing. I mean, Daniel, sorry, you go.
So I was just going to say one thing in relation to all that. So to kind of give another view on that as well. So for example, I do my Pool Water Basics videos that I try and release monthly, essentially to kind of give tidbits on how different topics are, the depth of essentially maybe water balance, maybe alkalinity, calcium hydrogens and so on. Just give them a bit of information to the industry so that they can look back on it as part of a training tool or just a reminder. But those videos can take me easily sort of a couple of hours, if not more sometimes, depending on how picky I'm being with the look of it, essentially. But, that's something I would imagine that AI can obviously do moving forwards. I haven't yet found a product that will do it as efficiently as I want it to, or as accurately maybe as I wanted to at the moment.
Yeah.
But I suppose ultimately they would come down to a premium long term as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being able to do those sort of things as well, I think would be a massive benefit
Yeah.
for the industry. But also in terms of training side of things, my role as a program leader for Pool Plant, we're all about trying to make sure we improve the industry through the training provision. Pool Plant operator courses, on-site designated supervisor courses, water testing courses, and so on. And being able to then develop those courses quicker in that process, being able to respond to the changes in the industry is quite key. So, that's where AI can help in that side of things as well long term.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just to pick up, what you said, you touched on this kind of like the investment point. So, I gave a talk last week at an expo event, and there were three areas that I advised every business leader when they think about AI. You need to consider these three very simple points because there's so much noise, right? There's so many tools, 40,000 tools out there. How do you know which one to bring into your company? Well, firstly, it starts with audit, right? So look at your company, look at your business, look at your operations. Forget about AI. Just look at what the problems are. What are the challenges? Where do you want to get to in 6 months, in 1 year? What's stopping you from getting to that point, right? So that's the first thing, is the audit. Know what the problems are. Don't look at the products and the tools and try to fit it, mesh it into your business, because that's not going to work, right? So to start with what the problems are or where the opportunities lie. The second thing is the strategy, right? So the fable of the carpenter and his tools, right? Blaming the tools for his shoddy table or chair or whatever. But that's not the case. It's the person wielding the tools, right? So it's the same thing. There's lots of very great tech out there, great AI tools, but it's knowing not just how to use them, but accepting that the first time you use them isn't going to get that end result that you envisage. You're going to have to tweak, you're going to have to change your strategy in order to get the most out of that tool or tools for your particular business or your particular use case, which is always different. But the last one is important, is the ROI, right? So it's all very well bringing in all these tools, but they cost. They're costly, right? Your system, it has a cost, right? So it has to make sense in terms of what is bringing in that investment going to actually give you back, right? What is that return on investment? And if there is a clear ROI, then just go for it, right? Get the strategy right, or change the strategy and make sure it's the exact problem, but is the ROI there, right? And that's, I think, I watched one of your videos, Daniel, I think exactly right at the beginning. It's got to make sense for you, right? Whether you're a hotel, you're a leisure center, you're a school, and you've got this pool system, does it make sense? Is there the return on investment in terms of the upkeep, the longevity of the pool that's going to be created, the safer environment? Most probably, yeah. When you consider all of those things, most probably, yes, please sign me up. But it's got to make sense. There's got to be that ROI, and all the AI tools is exactly the same.
Yeah. And ultimately, if you invest in those different systems, whether it be AI or whether it be my system or whatever, it's just about making sure you use them as well. I've got a couple of customers that have been with me for a while, but they use it very sporadically. But ultimately, you get more out of it the more you put in. So it's about trying to make sure that obviously it needs to be usable for yourself. Must have those features that you need. It needs to be cost effective, but you need to put into it what you want to get out of it ultimately. If you don't, it's going to be a waste.
Yeah, exactly. Going forward, Daniel, what's the goals for PoolWaterTS? What's in the pipeline for the sort of next 6 months, 1 year?
So ultimately, it's all about making the system better for everyone. I mean, like I said earlier, it's about trying to make it so that people can bespoke it to their own needs. There's essentially going to be more of that, but I've got a couple of areas that I'm working on at the moment. One is essentially a site checks platform. So it's not just specific to the pool or the plant, but also involves sort of dry sad areas as well. Now, that isn't going to be something that's going to be huge. I don't want it to overtake the kind of the idea of PoolWaterTS being a pool system. But ultimately, there's some customers that want that sort of system in place. That's being developed at the moment. It's kind of nearly there. But I also want to have links with the likes of the dosing controller companies or photometer companies, be able to have those data connections that they can then obviously input straight into the system. So that would be really useful. And that's potentially where AI might come into it in the long term as well, to be able to facilitate that to an extent. Yeah, essentially it's just about making it better for customers based on feedback that I'm getting, because ultimately I don't know everything.
Yeah.
I've only got a certain experience in terms of how to operate pools, but it is ground level upwards. But I haven't been in every single facility within the UK. So, feedback from those individual customers to be able to say, I'd like this in there. Generally, I'll be able to put it in within sort of a day or two. It's generally fairly easy to put in, but sometimes there's more complex things that they want in, which is fine on the development list. So, ultimately, it's about trying to make it better for the customers and help the industry improve. That's ultimately why I've made it and why I want to achieve long term.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And I mean, for anyone that wishes to reach out to you directly, Daniel, what's the best contact details to get you on?
So best to get me on email, which is info@PoolWaterTS.com. So that's the best one to get me on. That goes straight to myself. It's just myself obviously dealing with those emails. So yeah, on that one, or of course on LinkedIn. So either via the @PoolWaterTS or via Daniel Ekema. So yeah, no problem at all.
Excellent. I will put those contact details below, and I would encourage, especially if you're in those three categories, if you run a leisure centre or a sports centre, you have a school, you run a school that has a pool, or you're a, especially UK-based hotel with pool facilities, then really, get in touch with Daniel, even if it's just, I guess, a conversation, a kind of audit to know where they're at and what the possibilities are.
I mean, ultimately, everyone's allowed to have a free trial, 1 month free trial of the system. There's no pressure sales at all. So if it's not right for them at the end of that 1 month, absolutely fine. But if it is right for them, obviously I can support them, obviously moving forwards in terms of using that for their own site. But, try it and see if they like it. If they don't, that's absolutely fine.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess, Daniel, in summary, from my mind, I would say, firstly, that sort of statement I put at the beginning, data monitoring, manual, physical, paper-based data entry, that still happens, which is shocking and surprising, especially when you consider the importance, health importance of pools, right? Pool management is much more complicated than I ever knew. And that's something I understand. And, if you're within those categories, you would understand that. But, really, really very important is the implications that poor management of pools can have, on your business, on your pool, the longevity of your pool, and the health implications of your customers using that pool. It's something that should be taken very, very seriously. I suppose fourth is that you have this amazing asset in Daniel Ekema and PoolWaterTS to be able to, solve that and help you as a business. So
can I just mention about one other thing?
Yeah.
Just popped into my head. So one of the things I've been involved in the last sort of, I suppose, 2 years is something called a pool chemical incident register, which is something that has been designed to help the industry learn, essentially. Obviously, you mentioned there about safety, and obviously we spoke about it earlier. But one of the things that we've created in this form is essentially to allow people to anonymously report pool chemical incidents that have happened. Not just anonymous for the person reporting it, but also for the site it's involved at. So the questions are very kind of broad based, and we don't encourage pinpointing a particular site. That way it helps people have confidence and obviously know that it's not going to cause implications in terms of where it's happened. But it's all about trying to then help the industry learn. And this is led by the CBA, the Chemical Business Association, and involves various bodies that are part of that. So Institute of Swimming, RLSS, SimSpa, UK Active, STA are involved now as well, and a few other groups. And ultimately, it's to help the industry improve. So that's one of my main passions, which I think I might have mentioned a couple of times.
Yeah.
It's about trying to help the industry improve and make things safer. If people are interested, go onto the CBA website, so Chemical Business Association, look up the Chemical Incident Register. It's also available via my website as well. So there's a tab on the side for it. But, don't be afraid to log those pool incidents, because ultimately it's trying to help people improve. And it is anonymous for everyone. So, just to add that in there.
Yeah. And I think exactly what you've really touched upon this throughout is the collaborative nature of improving the industry, which I think is fantastic. And you don't necessarily get that in every industry, right? Actually wanting to improve for everyone. Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, fantastic. Really amazing insights. It definitely was worth my time reaching out to you, Daniel, and definitely not a boring topic. I think your project, what you're doing is extremely interesting, extremely worthwhile for for all businesses associated to get involved with. So, yeah, really, thank you very much, Daniel, for joining today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been good.
Brilliant. And thank you everyone for listening. Please like and share this video so we can get this message out to as many people as possible. Thank you.